Hi, this is Vinny and I'm here to talk to you about fins. Most people get really sort of invested in their purchase when it comes to things like dive computers and BCs and regulators. However, fins they're kind of red-headed stepchild of the scuba equipment world. It's something that people don't really pay a lot of attention to. I'm here to tell you that that the fins are probably the single biggest investment you can make in improving your diving, especially when in terms of sort of impact per dollar per rupee spent. Good fins will make it easy for you to swim in a current. Proper fitting fins will make it very easy to attain neutral trim. They make your kicking more efficient, they improve your air consumption, and generally they make your scuba diving a lot more zen. In general, there are two broad categories of fins: open heel fins and full foot fins. Full foot fins, as shown here, basically, as the name implies, they have a foot pocket. Your entire foot sort of slips into them and you can wear them barefoot. The second category of fins are called open heel fins. As the name implies, they're open at the heel and they're meant to be worn with diving boots. So, which is better, open heel or full foot? Well, that's a matter of personal choice to some degree. Let's talk about the advantage of each type of fins. Full foot fins are typically lighter, so they're easier to travel with, especially in this day and age of miserly airline baggage allowances. Fans of full foot fins also swear by how comfortable they are. Of course, this is very dependent on whether or not they fit well. If they don't fit well, they can be very uncomfortable. Too tight and you get cramps, too loose and they start to chafe and can cause cuts and blisters on your feet. Lastly, the design of full foot fins means that you don't need to buy or carry dive boots. So that's one less piece of equipment to worry about. Open heel fins, on the other hand, are more forgiving of fits. The neoprene of the dive boots does a very good job of keeping your skin free of cuts and chafes. Boots also have the benefit of being practical for beach entries and long walks long walks to the dive site. Also, by using thicker boots, you can use the same fins for colder waters as well, something you cannot do with full foot fins. And lastly, there's simply more options when it comes to open heel fins, because that is where most manufacturers devote their R&D. Personally, I prefer the greater choice and flexibility offered by open heel fins, and that's generally the design I recommend to most divers. That said, if you plan to dive mostly warm waters and you're able to find full foot fins whose design works for you and they fit well, then yes, they can also be a good choice. When it comes to fins, the most important feature we care about is propulsion, how well the fin gets you from point A to point B, especially in currents. And when it comes to propulsion, the attribute that you care about most is called thrust. Thrust basically means how far does the fin move you with each kick. All else being equal, you want fins that have greater thrust because they're obviously more effective at propelling you in the water and they'll do better in currents. Now, when it comes to thrust, this is going to disappoint some people, but the sad reality is that size matters. All else being equal, longer fins will provide more thrust than smaller fins. This is simply a matter of physics, there's not much you can do about it. In addition to size, and I promise you, we're still talking about fins, stiffness also matters. When you have two fins of similar size, the stiffer fin will provide more thrust than softer fins. The downside, of course, is that stiffer fins require more effort to kick and can also be tiring for people who don't have good technique or the best leg strength. So far, we've talked about propulsion. However, there's one very underrated aspect of fins that most people don't think about, and that is the effect it has on your trim. If you think about the human body, when you're in the water, you're horizontal, your center of gravity is somewhere in the middle, and the fins your feet are the furthest from your center of gravity. So any weight applied to your to your feet, either up or down, has the greatest amount of torque or moment on your balance. So what that really means is that fins that are too heavy will drag your feet down. Fins that are too light will lift your feet up. And basically, if the fins don't match your body's natural trim characteristics, it's very difficult to get a nice neutral horizontal trim and stay that way. You'll always be struggling to sort of, prevent your feet from going up or down. And when you start struggling, you're not so relaxed in the water, your air consumption goes up, you generally lose your diving zen. We've talked about propulsion and trim. There is a third element to consider, and this primarily applies more towards people who are inside shipwrecks or underwater photographers, And this has to do with what I call the control of a fins. Control refers to how easy it is to make small adjustments in the water. If you're just diving in open water going from point A to point B, this is probably not something you care about. But like I said, if you're an underwater photographer and you're trying to take a picture and you want to make very small adjustments, fins with good control will let you do that. They have what is called good water feel. So when you move your ankles or move your feet, you get a very good feedback sort of on how much resistance to use, how much force to apply, and things like that. Same thing inside a shipwreck when you're trying to make small adjustments. Having fins with good control really help you sort of maneuver through obstacles, or make precise turns and things like that. Another thing you might want to think about is actually the buckle. Old style fins used to have like a quick release buckle, which you basically would clip in. You could tighten it and loosen it, so you could sort of really dial it in exactly the way you wanted. They're also a bit clunky. When you're in the water, you have to reach down with your feet, try to find this. In cold water with gloves and your fingers are numb, it's kind of often difficult to open the clip and so on and so forth. So these days, most fins actually use bungees. They're this. As far as I know, actually most fins in the market these days do come with bungees. If not, it's easy enough to buy aftermarket bungees and replace them. So, or go the other way if bungees don't work for you. So this is not really sort of a critical factor, but just something to think about. Let's look at some noteworthy fin designs from the past and the present. Let's start with the Cressy Master Frogs. These are my personal favorites. They're about as low-tech as fins get. They're essentially one long, rigid piece of plastic, and the harder you kick, the faster you go. And there's pretty much no current that they can't handle, provided your legs can keep up. The downside of these fins, of course, is that A, they're super rigid and quite difficult to use, and they're also very long and so difficult to pack and travel with. Next up is another classic design from way back when, the Scuba Pro jet fins. They revolutionized fin design when they were released due to the use of vents. These vents allowed the fins to be fairly compact in size and still provide superb amounts of thrust and also excellent control in the water. Even today, despite being fairly diminutive, they are one of the most powerful fins in the market. The only downside is that they're really heavy. And so you need to be very careful with the rest of your gear in order to achieve neutral trim. The Apex RK3s are the kinder, gentler, more modern variant of the jet fins, the kind that announce their pronouns. While they don't have the same power as the OG jet fins, they do come close enough, and they're much lighter, making them more suitable for the vast majority of divers today that are looking for compact, powerful vented fins. The third classic design comes from Mares, the Avanti Quattros, a design that has been around nearly unchanged for almost 3 decades, and with good reason. While Scuba Pro went with a vented design, the Quattros used channels to vary the stiffness on the upkick and downkick parts of the stroke. This lets them provide a very high amount of power while still being relatively easy to kick. These are at present my recommended fins for most divers looking for an all-round fins that can handle any open water diving scenario. Now let's move on to some more innovative designs, starting with the split fins. Atomic makes them, as do several other brands. These are one of the most polarizing fins in the market. People either love them or hate them, there's no middle ground. Some of it has to do with the fact that they require a very different kicking technique from other fins, so it's a matter of whether or not you're able to adjust to it. Also, you cannot do the frog kick with split fins, which makes them useless in wreck diving. Lastly, they don't have much in the way of control. So if you're trying to make small, precise adjustments in your position, these aren't the fins for you. But the people who love them swear by how effortless swimming becomes on scuba with them. So, this is one of those try before you buy things, I guess. Hinged blades are another design element used by manufacturers. These supposedly allow the fin to provide the thrust of a much longer blade. Tusa uses this design in many of the fins, but they take it one step further with the high flex switch. These fins actually allow you to detach the entire blade of the fin from the pocket, making it very compact and easy to pack. You do give up a bit of power though, so there is a trade-off involved. And last of all is another hinge fin design, this time from Aqualung. Aqualung makes some very high quality, very popular traditional fins, but this one stands out for 2 reasons. To start with, it uses something called power bands. As the name implies, these are 2 bands that connect the foot pockets to the blade and provide additional snap to the fins while kicking, thereby increasing thrust. And Aqualung has added gears to these power bands. By changing this setting, you can adjust the tension of the power bands and so make the fins feel softer or stiffer. How cool is that? Okay, now that we've talked about the different features of fins, how do you actually narrow it down? The first thing you have to realize is that there is no single right fin for everybody. The type of fin, the type of fin that you get will depend on the way you kick. If you do the flutter kick, some fins are better for that than others. If you do the frog kick, some fins are better for that. It also depends on your leg strength. If you have strong legs, are a good swimmer and have good technique, you can probably get by with more powerful fins. If you're a weaker swimmer or you don't have the best kicking technique, then you might want fins that are a bit softer or sort of less rigid and easier to kick. Remember what I said earlier. If the weight of the fins doesn't match your own body's natural trim characteristics, you're going to find it very hard to have even trim in the water. You're going to be struggling the entire time, and that's going to completely ruin your dive. So that really, you can do all the research that you want in the world about fins, but the only way to know for sure is to try them out in the water for yourself. Here at Bangalore Scuba, we have a trial program. You can come check out the fins in a pool, and we have a sample of 7-8 of the most popular fins in the market. You can try them out, see what works well for you. Once you get the right fins, it's so easy to stay horizontal. You can absolutely relax in the water. Your air consumption will improve. Your ability to kick will become more efficient because if you're horizontal, it's easier to propel yourself in the water as well. Generally, diving becomes a lot easier.